On June 8, 2026, Tim Cook stood on the stage at Apple Park for the last time as the man running the keynote. At the end, he wiped away a tear. But the emotional goodbye wasn't the real story that day. The real story was hiding in a single sentence. The moment Apple admitted that the new Siri is powered by Google, the company that spent 15 years promising it would never depend on anyone, just signed its intelligence over to its oldest rival. This is how it happened, and why it might not be the surrender everyone thinks it is. Let's start with what actually happened on stage. Apple unveiled a completely rebuilt Siri, running on a custom Google Gemini model with 1.2 trillion parameters. For context, Apple's own model, the one behind Apple Intelligence, was around 150 billion. That's an 8-fold jump. Apple didn't upgrade Siri, it replaced its brain entirely. The new Siri gets its own dedicated app. It can see what's on your screen. It handles complex multi-step requests across apps, the things Apple has been promising and failing to ship since 2024. Under the hood, there's a 3-tier system. Simple tasks stay on your iPhone, running Apple's own small models. Mid-level requests go to Apple's private cloud compute. But the heavy reasoning? That gets routed to Google's cloud, running on NVIDIA hardware inside a Google data center. And there was one more thing buried in the keynote, a new extension system that lets users plug in other AI models. For the first time ever, Claude on an iPhone as an option. Apple, the most closed company in tech, just opened the gates. The question is, why? To understand why, you have to go back 15 years. In 2011, Siri wasn't a punchline, it was the future. Apple launched it months before the world had ever heard of ChatGPT, Alexa, or Google Assistant. Apple had a multi-year head start in voice AI, and then, nothing. For over a decade, Siri barely improved. It set timers. It got the weather wrong. It became the joke in every Apple review. Then came 2024, Apple Intelligence. The big comeback, glossy ads, huge promises, a Siri that understands personal context, that acts across your apps. It didn't ship. Feature after feature was delayed. The smarter Siri slipped from 2024 to 2025 to in the coming year. And it got worse than embarrassment. Apple agreed to pay $250 million to settle a class action lawsuit claiming it misled customers about Apple Intelligence features. Features it advertised on devices people bought that never arrived. Inside Apple, the situation triggered a crisis meeting in 2025 and a full restructuring of the AI organization. The conclusion the executives reached was brutal. Apple could not catch up on its own, not in time. So they did something Apple almost never does. They went shopping. January 12th, 2026. Apple and Google announce a multi-year partnership. Gemini will become the foundation of the new Siri and the next generation of Apple Intelligence. The price? Roughly $1 billion a year, the largest AI licensing deal in history. Now, Apple evaluated everyone, OpenAI, Anthropic, and it chose Google. The official statement said Gemini provided, quote, the most capable foundation for Apple Foundation models. But here's the irony nobody at that keynote said out loud. For years, Google has paid Apple around $20 billion a year just to be the default search engine on the iPhone. Money flowed one way. Now for the first time, money flows back. Apple is paying Google because Google owns the intelligence. That reversal is the whole story of the AI era in a single transaction. So that's the surrender story, and it's the one most headlines ran with. But there's another way to read this, and honestly, it might be the more accurate one. Think about what Apple actually bought for $1 billion a year. Building a frontier AI model costs tens of billions in chips, data centers, and talent, with no guarantee of winning. Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic are locked in a brutal, money-burning race. Apple just opted out. It pays $1 billion, pocket change against Apple's cash flow, and gets a frontier model anyway. And look at the structure of the deal. Gemini runs Siri's deepest reasoning, but it's invisible. There's no Google branding. The interface is Apple's. The customer relationship is Apple's. The data is wrapped in Apple's private cloud compute. Google did the most expensive work in technology, and Apple gets to put its logo on the result. Sound familiar? It should. Apple doesn't fabricate its own chips. TSMC does. Apple doesn't assemble iPhones. Foxconn does. Apple's entire playbook for 20 years has been, let someone else own the brutal, low-margin layer while Apple owns the customer. Maybe AI models are just the next commodity layer. Today, the brain is Gemini. With the new extension system, tomorrow it could be Claude or anyone else. Apple made the model swappable, which means no AI company has leverage over Apple. Unless the model is the product. Unless, in the AI era, whoever owns the intelligence eventually owns the customer too, and Apple just invited its biggest rival inside the iPhone. One of these two stories is true, and we won't know which one for years. Which brings us back to that tier on stage. Tim Cook took over from Steve Jobs in 2011, the same year Siri launched. In 15 years, he turned Apple into the most valuable company on earth. The supply chain, the services empire, the $3 trillion machine, that's Cook. But he leaves with one unfinished chapter. On his watch, Apple, the company with more cash than anyone, missed the biggest platform shift since the smartphone. The Gemini deal isn't how Cook wanted to solve AI. It's how he had to. On September 1st, John Ternus takes over. 25 years at Apple, a hardware engineer, and his inheritance is strange. The most profitable consumer business in history, running on a brain rented from Google. His real job isn't the next iPhone. It's answering one question. Can Apple ever own its own intelligence again? 15 years ago, Apple had a head start in AI and lost it. Now it's betting that owning the customer matters more than owning the intelligence. So here's the question I'll leave you with. In 5 years, when you talk to your iPhone, whose product are you really using? So here's the question. Tell me what you think in the comments. Surrender or Masterstroke? If you want the signal, not the hype, subscribe.